The hangar lights buzzed cold and white over the grounded aircraft, casting long shadows across 12 engineers who stood frozen, clipboards trembling in their hands. Victoria Hale paced before them, her heels striking the concrete like gunshots, each step sharper than the last. Behind her, a $40 million jet sat silent, its left engine refusing to respond to anything. Diagnostics, overrides, nothing. In 6 hours, she was supposed to be airborne, closing the largest acquisition of her career. Now she stood in a hangar full of degrees and certifications, and not one of them had an answer. Her eyes swept past the engineers, past the consultants flown in from 3 states, and landed, briefly, contemptuously, on a man in a faded gray maintenance jacket sweeping debris near the wall. She didn't know his name. She didn't care to. What happened over the next few hours would change both of their lives forever. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances can change the world, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to the Aura Fables for more unforgettable stories. 3 years earlier, the city of Seattle had been gray, and with the morning Daniel Reyes walked into Hale Aerospace's maintenance division wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large and a resume that didn't reflect the man underneath it. He hadn't always pushed brooms and refueled hydraulic lines for other men's machines. There had been a different life once, a life with a corner office overlooking Lake Union, a life where Daniel had been one of the most decorated avionics engineers in the Pacific Northwest, the kind of mind that defense contractors quietly fought over. He had built systems that flew faster, safer, and smarter than anything else in the sky. Then came the illness. Daniel's wife, Elena, had been diagnosed on a Tuesday in March, and by the following winter, she was gone, leaving behind a 5-year-old daughter named Sophia with her mother's eyes and a question in them that never quite went away. Where did Mommy go? Daniel had walked away from the corner office without a second thought. Engineering contracts meant travel, late nights, unpredictable hours, none of which a grieving little girl could survive. So he took a maintenance job that paid a fraction of his worth but let him be home every evening, let him braid Sophia's hair before school, let him sit beside her at the kitchen table while she did her homework. He never spoke of what he used to be. He simply showed up, day after day, in his gray jacket, quietly confident, utterly invisible to the executives who walked past him without a glance. Victoria Hale was not built the same way. She had inherited the company from her father, and though she carried his name, she had never carried his patience or his respect for the people who kept the company's planes in the air. To Victoria, a uniform meant a salary cap, and a salary cap meant a ceiling on intelligence. She believed brilliance wore a suit. She believed competence had a price tag, and that price tag started somewhere far above minimum wage. It was a belief that had never once been tested, until the morning her jet refused to start. The crisis had begun innocently enough. A pre-flight diagnostic flagged an irregularity in the left engine's fuel computer, a fault so deeply buried in the avionics architecture that the onboard system itself couldn't isolate it. Victoria's chief engineer, a man named Holt who wore his confidence like cologne, assured her it was nothing, a sensor glitch, easily reset. It was not nothing. By the 3rd reset, the engine refused to respond at all, and by the 4th, smoke curled faintly from a connection panel no one could identify the source of. Holt called in 2 outside consulting firms. 6 more engineers arrived within the hour, laptops open, voices rising, blames circulating faster than solutions. Victoria stood in the center of it all, her phone buzzing with messages from the acquisition board, her jaw tightening with every passing minute. Daniel kept sweeping. He had seen this exact fault architecture before in a previous life, on a system he himself had helped design the predecessor of. He recognized the panel. He recognized the cascading error pattern. But he said nothing, because men like him had learned, painfully, that wealthy rooms did not welcome wisdom wearing a maintenance jacket. He simply watched, broom in hand, as 12 credentialed minds failed to see what was right in front of them. It was Holt who finally noticed Daniel lingering near the engine bay a moment too long.
You.
"This isn't a viewing gallery," he snapped, the kind of cruelty that came easily to men who had never been spoken to that way themselves. Victoria turned, irritation flashing across her face, ready to echo the dismissal. But something stopped her. Perhaps exhaustion, perhaps desperation. "Do you have something to say?" she asked instead, her voice sharp with disbelief that she was even asking. Daniel set down his broom. He walked toward the engine with the unhurried calm of a man who had done this 1,000 times in a different life, his weathered hands moving with quiet, undeniable purpose against the backdrop of Holt's visible irritation and Victoria's folded arms. He asked for a panel to be opened, not the one the consultants had been probing, but one 3 connections further down, a section nobody had thought to check because it required understanding the system's original architecture, not just its manual. Holt scoffed. Victoria, against her own instincts, told him to let the man work. What followed was 4 minutes of silence, so complete that the hum of the hangar lights seemed deafening. Daniel traced a single wire, isolated a corroded relay no diagnostic tool could have flagged, and replaced it with a spare part he'd noticed sitting and used on a nearby cart. He closed the panel. He nodded toward the cockpit. The engine, after 6 hours of failure, roared to life on the first attempt. The hangar fell into stunned, absolute silence. Holt's mouth opened, then closed. The consultants stared at their laptops as if the screens themselves had betrayed them. Victoria stood motionless, staring at the man in the gray jacket as though seeing him for the first time. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then spoke the truth he had buried for 3 years. He told her his name in full, Daniel Reyes, and watched recognition dawn slowly, painfully, across her face. She knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. He was the engineer behind the very avionics framework her company's entire fleet was built on, a man who had vanished from the field years ago, presumed retired or lost to grief, never once imagined sweeping floors in his own former industry's shadow. It was at that moment that Sophia appeared in the hangar doorway, dropped off by a neighbor who'd misread the schedule, searching for her father among the crowd. She found him standing at the center of it, and as the engineers and executives slowly began to applaud, uncertain at first, then full, then thunderous, a standing ovation rising around the very engine he had just saved, Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She had only ever seen her father quiet, tired, unseen. She had never seen him celebrated. She ran to him, and he knelt down, and for a moment the most powerful people in the hangar simply watched a daughter embrace a father who had given up everything for her. Victoria Hale was the first to apologize, her voice breaking with a humility she had never once shown an employee. Holt followed, ashamed, his earlier cruelty hanging heavy in the air. Over the following months, Daniel was made chief systems engineer, his old title restored and then some, but he made one condition before accepting: every maintenance worker who had been overlooked, underpaid, and unseen the way he once was would receive raises, recognition, and a seat at the table when major decisions were made. Victoria agreed, without hesitation. Sophia grew up watching her father walk taller, not because of the title, but because the world had finally caught up to who he had always been. And in that hangar, where a $40 million jet had once sat silent and broken, a deeper truth had quietly taken flight, that true greatness isn't measured by titles, it's measured by character, and that every person carries invisible battles, fought in silence, long before the world ever thinks to applaud.